tell, then you see the road. I'm out to my soul into the size. Whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of, What If Harry Potter Meets Rwby? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Asian Lion Heart 310 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Are you really going to attend Beacon? Amber asked Harry/Thanatos as the two of them stood in the palace's library. It was early in the morning and so there was no soul yet to judge. Beside, Harry had to prepare himself. Yes, he replied casually as if it was not a big deal. Why? She asked him curiously. Harry shot her glance of hidden hesitation. He couldn't tell her of the true reason of this decision. Sure, it was mostly to have a little moment with Cinderfall but also to have a better view of the mortal plane. Beside, if he attended Beacon Academy, he would get to see the other immortal, Ojpin. I need a change of scenery, he replied after a second or two of silence. Oh, Amber nodded in understanding but then blinked as she asked him curiously. But if you are leaving, who will judge the souls? Harry was about to answer before blinking once he realized that he actually had no answer for this. Damn it, I knew I forgot something, he muttered under his breath while slapping his face. Amber couldn't help herself from giggling in amusement at the sight which caused him to shoot her a small glare of annoyance. But it did nothing but amusing her more. Can't you use your power to, I don't know, multiply yourself? The young woman inquired him with a giggle. Harry's annoyed face turned blank as he stared at her with an emotionless face. Then he slapped his forehead again, muttering to himself. I'm such an idiot, why have I never thought of that before? Maybe because, while you are deaf, you are still a man and men are not near as smart as us women. Amber retorted haughtily. Ha ha ha, really funny, Thanatos/Harry retorted with a roll of his eyes. Ignoring the laughing young woman beside him, he then closed his eyes before focusing on his powers. Soon, enough a faint and blurry shape started to form in front of the two before it became more and more visible. Amber stopped laughing when she saw the new figure standing before her. Harry/Thanatos reopened his eyes to see his creation. In front of him stood a young woman, around 17 years old in age, with middle-long black hair, shining emerald green eyes and a well-built figure. On his forehead, there was no mark. The clone was a carbon copy of how he looked like him so many times ago or what he would have looked like at the same age without glasses. DMN, he really hated those glasses and was really glad to not have to wear them ever again. The young version of him was wearing a sleeveless turtleneck dark gray top, white long sleeves underneath, long black fingerless gloves on, and black leather boots. His attire was topped by a black hooded cloak fastened to his shoulders by cross-shaped pins. Dangling at his sides were a pair of sharp dual swords. Then, contrary to him, his younger counterpart was not as tall as him. While he now stood 8 feet 5 inches, his clone was only 6 feet 3 inches. Perfect, Thanatos purred in ravishment as a smirk grew on his face while his clone bowed at him respectfully. Beside him, Amber looked back and forth between the two of them with disbelief, unable to form words. Both Harry shot amused look toward the young woman. Then the younger one disappeared in thin air and at the moment Amber chose to regain her composure. Where did he go? Veil, with him being a part of him, we share a connection each night. When he will go to sleep, everything he saw, heard, smell will be sent to me, Thanatos explained with a grin. If only I had that power before, the young woman grumbled under her breath and he patted her head in mock sympathy. Aw, you poor thing, he cooed at her with a grin and she shot him a glare before walking away with a pout, leaving behind a laughing embodiment of death. Elsewhere. Meanwhile, in Vale, the younger version of Thanatos, we will call him Harry James Potter for the occasion, was slowly entering a Vale airship and he had to admit that it was surely a new experience for him. He had missed the feeling of the wind ruffling his hair and the sight of the blue sky. Feeling the breeze was a pleasure he would never take for granted ever again. It made him remember the time he used his broom to fly during Quidditch games. Bittersweet memories entered his mind as the thought. It was a long time ago. Shaking his head, Harry then managed to make his way through the crowd of teenagers entering the airship. The advantage of being the embodiment of death was that he could anywhere without being noticed. A smirk grew on his face as none of the people present knew that death itself was among them. After all, the very concept of death walking among the livings was not something many would consider possible. In a sense, they would be correct, but they didn't know that death was human in appearance. So, shaking his head, the 17-years-old in appearance young man pressed his back against a wall, watching the outside through the window as the airship took off into the sky. He had greatly missed the light of the sun or the sight of it enlightening the world. He was so focused on this that, when a new voice echoed from nearby, he was almost caught off guard. "Oh, I can't believe my baby sister is going to beacon with me. This is the best day ever. Please stop." Turning his head toward where it came from, he saw two girls, a blonde and black one hugging one another, well more like the former was hugging the latter who was trashing madly to escape. The hugger was a tall, fair-skinned young woman with lilac eyes and long, thick, wavy bright golden hair that fades to pale gold at the tips with a cowl sticking out at the top. She was wearing a jacket that bears her midriff, with golden brown piping and short, puffy sleeves with black cuffs that feature two gold buttons. Underneath this, she wore a low-cut yellow CRP top with a drawing on the left BRST in black. She was also wearing a brown belt covered by a pleated brown piece of material reaching from hip to hip around the back of her waist, with her emblem emblazoned on the rightmost pleat in gold. Underneath this was a long, white, asymmetrical piece of material reaching to her knee on the right side, as well as a pair of tight black spandex compression shorts that reach her upper thighs. In addition, she had a pair of brown, knee-high boots and orange over-the-knee socks, with the right sock pushed down just below the knee. A gray bandana is tied around her left knee. Harry had to admit that she was really attractive. If Molly Weasley was there, she would have called her a bimbo. Shaking his head to get rid of the memory of the annoying woman, he turned his head to look at the other girl and was taken aback by her appearance. If the blonde inherited the beauty side of the family, the younger inherited the cute side. She was a fair-skinned young girl with silver eyes, and neck-length black hair with red tips. The girl had a black long-sleeved blouse with a high collar and red trim on the sleeves, over which was a black waist cincher with red lacing up the front, and a matching skirt with red lining. She was also wearing a pair of thick black stockings and black combat boots with red laces, red trims around the top, and red soles. Her outfit was topped by a red hooded cloak similar to the one he had fastened to her shoulders by cross-shaped pins. Like the precedent girl, she had a large silver buckle which looked like a rose on her wide black belt, which was slung around her peach on an angle. Harry was looking at her in shock as she was the carbon copy of a soul he had seen some years ago, Summer Rose. He then realized that he was looking at her daughters. Shaking his head, the young man decided to focus back on what they were saying. The blonde was no longer hugging the other and in fact were talking. "I don't want to be the bee's knees, okay? I don't want to be any kind of knees. I just want to be a normal girl with normal knees." Rwby was saying to her sister they looked nothing alike. "What's with you? Aren't you excited?" the blonde asked her with a frown as if confused about something. "Of course I'm excited, the shorted girl sighed deeply before resuming. "I got moved ahead 2 years. I don't want people to think I'm special or anything." The blonde gave the younger girl a one-armed hug saying gently, "But you are special." Harry looked at the carbon copy of Summer with interest. She entered Beacon 2 years early. Interesting, she must have done something incredible to manage it. However, his thoughts were interrupted by the news which he ignored completely or almost. The robbery was led by nefarious criminal Roman Torchwick, who continues to evade authorities. If you have any information on his whereabouts, please contact the Vale Police Department. "Back to you, Lisa," a man was saying through the Vale New Networks. Harry had listened at the word Roman Torchwick and was now looking at the screen, which was now showing something else entirely. On the screen, apart of the girl Lisa, there was a photo of animal-eared demonstrators, without a doubt faunus, holding signs saying, "We are not animals," followed by an image of the logo of a growling red wolf's head with 3 scratch marks. Thank you, Cyril. In other news, this Saturday's faunus civil rights protest turned dark when members of the White Fan disrupted the ceremony. The once peaceful organization has now disrupted, Lisa began to say, and Harry clenched his fists in slight anger. While he could understand why the White Fang acted like this, they were being ridiculous. He was totally for having more right to the faunus, but he doesn't condemn violence, especially when innocents are hurt. Beside, because of the White Fang's action, humans are becoming more and more wary of the faunus kind. However, the news was then cut off as a hologram of a woman took its place. She was a middle-aged woman with very light blonde hair tied back in a bun with a curl hanging down the right side of her face. Her eyes were bright green in color and she wore thin ovular glasses. She had dangling teal earrings that matched the hanging pendant on her collar. In addition, she wore a white long-sleeved, pleated blouse that has a wide keyhole neckline and gauntlet cuffs that flared in pleats at the wrist. Her lower body was covered by a black high-waisted pencil skirt with bronze buttons and black fading into brown stockings. She also wore black boots with bronze heels and a cape that was purple inside and black on the outside. Harry couldn't help but compare her to Minerva McGonagall, the head of Gryffindor at Hogwarts. Why? Because of their stern looks. Except that this woman was more attractive looking than the old woman. Even now, he still held a grudge against the woman who had been nothing but Dumbledore's PP cat, more like AB. Shaking his head, he focused on the present as the hologram started to speak. Hello, and welcome to Beacon. My name is Glinda Goodwitch. You are among a privileged few who have received the honor of being selected to attend this prestigious academy. Our world is experiencing an incredible time of peace, and as future huntsmen and huntresses, it is your duty to uphold it. You have demonstrated the courage needed for such a task, and now it is our turn to provide you with the knowledge and the training to protect our world. With that said, the hologram disappeared as quickly as it came. Harry rolled his eyes at the woman's name. Seriously, who in their right mind would name someone Goodwitch? Then cries of surprise caught his attention. Oh, wow! Look, you can see Signal from up here. He turned his head to see the younger version of Summer looking through the glass walls alongside the blonde and several other people. They were all looking at the city below. I guess home isn't too far after all. Ruby commented to her sister. Beacon's our home, now. The blonde responded to her sister with a smile before the sound of someone groaning caught their attention. The person, whoever it was, ran toward the back of the ship. Well, I guess the view isn't for everyone, the blonde commented with a roll of her lilac eyes. It was a nice moment while it lasted, her younger sister agreed with a nod. Then her eyes suddenly landed on him and blinked when she realized that the two of them were staring at one another. However, Harry quickly looked away and the girl did the same with a small blush of embarrassment on her face, which was thankfully unnoticed by the blonde. A few moments later, and after ignoring the two sisters during the rest of the trip, the airship finally landed before opening the cockpit to let the passengers out. Harry saw a blur quickly leaving the airship to go straight toward the nearest trash can where he released whatever he ate recently. Yep, clearly this person had a problem with transports. Anyway, everyone stepped out of the airship and Harry noticed that there were many others of those machines and all of them had passengers. Looked like many people had been accepted into Beacon Academy. The competition will be tough, but he will succeed. Then he saw it, the academy itself. He had to admit that it was a really breathtaking sight for sure, and more welcoming than Hogwarts. It was also larger and grander looking. However, he still thought that his palace was better. But then he felt it. It was faint, but there was clearly someone magical, someone, and it was coming from beneath the very foundation of the school. Is it possible? He whispered to himself softly as he narrowed his eyes at the school. Behind him, he could hear the two sisters talking. The view from Vale's got nothing on this, it was the blondie's voice. Oh my gosh, sis. That kid's got a collapsible staff. And she's got a fire sword. That was the younger sister and she sounded like a child meeting its idol. Ow. Oh oh. Turning his head, he saw the blonde holding the younger girl by her hood with an amused look on her face. Easy there, little sister. They're just weapons. What she said must have offended her sister because the younger girl gasped in outrage before going into a small rant. Just weapons. They're an extension of ourselves. They're a part of us. Oh, they're so cool. Harry couldn't help but chuckling a bit, looked like Summer's kid was a weapon lover. Sure, weapons were cool and useful, but that was it. Well, why can't you swoon over your own weapon? Aren't you happy with it? The blonde asked her sister with a raised brow. Harry watched with surprise when the younger girl pulled out a large scythe. Of course I'm happy with. Crescent Rose. I just really like seeing new ones. It's like meeting new people, but better, Summer's kid responded to her sister in a small tone at the end. Harry was still looking at her weapon with shock before looking at the girl with amusement. A scythe user too? Like mother like daughter, as they say, he thought to himself with a chuckle. Then he decided to look back at the girls only to realize that he had missed a part of their conversation. The carbon copy of Summer was pulling her hood back on her head, looking at her sister with confusion clear on her face. But why would I need friends if I have you, she said to the blonde. Well, Goldilocks began to say nervously before a group of students dashed down the road. Harry's eyes narrowed when she saw her face suddenly brightening. Actually, my friends are here. Gotta go catch up. See ya, bye. The blonde quickly said to her sister before leaving abruptly. Her sudden departure caused Summer's clone to spin around with dizzy eyes. Wait, where are you going? Are we supposed to go to our dorms? Where are our dorms? Do we have dorms? She cried out to her sister, but she wasn't in sight anymore. Harry felt a bit sympathetic toward her, but then his eyes widened when he saw her still reeling backwards heading toward a luggage cart. As quickly as possible, he rushed toward her, and just as she was about to fall backward, he caught her with an arm, preventing her. Wow, that was close, he commented while pulling the girl forward, away from the luggage. Blinking, Summer's kid looked behind her, stared at the cart with wide eyes before looking back at him with nervousness as a hint of pink colored her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered softly, but it was loud enough to be heard. No problem, Harry began to say with a smile when someone stepped in. What are you doing? Turning their heads, they saw a pale-skinned young woman with pale blue eyes and long white hair pulled back into an off-center ponytail pinned with a silver, icicle-shaped tiara. She was wearing heels and she has a scar running vertically down her left eye and face. She was wearing a thigh-length strapless dress with a faint color gradation from white to pale blue at the hem. A small piece of black lace was sitting in the front of her neckline, and the hem of the dress is scalloped and stitched to resemble snowflakes, with layers of white tulle under the skirt. Over this, she wore a bell-sleeved bolero with the same color gradation as her dress from shoulder to wrist, lined in red and with a ruffled collar. On the back of the bolero was a crest. A crest Harry recognized with anger, the Schnee crest. Sorry. Summer's kid cried out to the newcomer almost instinctively. Sorry. Do you have any idea of the damage you could have caused? The Schnee hissed to the younger girl with narrowed eyes. The girl, whose name was still unknown to him, was about to answer when Harry stepped forward. Hold on, girl. Nothing had happened. Your precious suitcases are fine, so back off, he hissed sternly at the girl who looked taken aback by his behavior. It was as if it was the first time she had been talked to like this. How dare you talk to me like that? Don't you know who I am? Snow White snarled to him in anger. I talk to people as I please, girl. As for knowing who you are, it is not really hard not to, Schnee. Harry retorted with coldness as he glared daggers at the girl, who took a step back in slight fear at his tone. However, it quickly turned into anger again as she said those next words. How could a brute like you get in Beacon? As for you, what are you even doing here? Aren't you a little young to be attending Beacon? She was speaking to Summer's clone at the last part. Well the girl tried to speak but she was clearly nervous of the older girl. I will say it one more time Schnee, back OFF. Harry snarled the last part in a really cold tone while releasing a bit of his aura. The few people still present all stiffened in fright at the cold feeling before quickly leaving the area. Not too far from there, someone was watching them with slight interest. It was a fair-skinned young woman with wavy black hair and amber eyes who was wearing a black, buttoned vest with coattails and a single silver button on the front. Underneath this is a white, sleeveless, high-necked, CRP undershirt and white shorts with a zipper on the front of each leg. She was also wearing black low-heeled boots and full stockings with a color gradation of black to purple at her ankles. Her emblem was visible on the outside of both thighs just below her shorts in white. On her left arm was a black detached sleeve with a silver cuff around her bicep, and black ribbons are wrapped around both forearms. A small, loose, black scarf is wrapped around her neck. Back to the trio, the Schnee girl, was looking at him with clear fear in her eyes, unable to look away from the shining emerald eyes looking at her. It was as if she was being hypnotized. Then a second later, the girl dashed away while some people, probably her helpers, followed her with the luggage. Huffing in satisfaction as he glared at her retreating form, Harry looked back at the young girl beside him who was looking down at the ground with sadness. Welcome to Beacon, he heard her whispering to herself. Hey, it's okay. Ignore the BRT and smile. Harry said to her with a bright smile to cheer her up. It seemed to do the trick because she shot him a smile of her own, her cheeks slightly reddening. Thank you again for your help. I'm Ruby Rose but everyone call me Rwby. Summer's daughter, whose name was Rwby, presented herself with a hint of shyness. Which was really cute by the way. A pleasure to meet you fair maiden, allow me to present myself, Sir Harry James Potter. At your service milady. Harry said dramatically in a knight-like manner along with a fake reverence. Rwby stared at him with a few seconds before giggling loudly in amusement. The girl with amber eyes, who had been watching the entire time, chuckled a bit at the scene before disappearing. Then their moment was broken by the sound of someone's voice. Hey! Turning their heads, they saw a tall young man with fair skin, blonde hair and dark blue eyes. He was quite toned, having strong muscles in his arms, shoulders, and upper chest. He was wearing a black short-sleeved hoodie with detached reddish-orange sleeves and a dark brown image of a bunny rabbit trimmed in white with cute black round eyes. Covering his hoodie and hiding the rabbit was a white diamond-shaped chest plate cut off above his lower abdomen, and placed over his shoulders are a pair of white spalders with rear braces set under them. Below, he was wearing blue jeans with a white patch placed on the left knee and black sneakers which have left and right written in black on the respective shoes' soles. In addition, he had two belts crisscrossing his waist, both different shades of brown, with a pair of small pouches on them along with brown wrist-length gloves with exposed fingertips and small metal plates over the back. A sword is strapped to his left hip in a sheath. In short, he looked like a knight coming out of a fairy tale. Hey, the two responded at the same time, greeting the newcomer. I'm John, the guy said while holding out his hand. Harry James Potter, pleasure to meet you John, Harry greeted back with a soft smile while shaking the offered hand. John smiled back before holding his hand out to Rwby who shook it. Rwby. She presented herself before adding something that caught the two boys off guard. Aren't you the guy that threw up on the ship? While John was left spluttering in shock, Harry did the one thing many would do in such a situation. He laughed much to the embarrassment of John whose shoulders slumped in resignation. Once Harry stopped laughing, he along with Rwby, got to speak with the new guy John Ark. Much like the Weasley, he had a really big family with several sisters. The memory of the Weasley clan had almost darkened his mood if it hadn't been for Ruby's cute face, and the trio managed to head straight to the Academy's auditorium. Rwby had questioned him about his swords and had been a bit amazed by the fact he could combine them into a twin blade. Apparently, twin blades, like scythes, were very difficult to wield. She had also been a bit shocked by the fact he didn't possess anything for ranged attacks such as guns. Why? Because back when he was a simple human, right after his recovery from Azkaban, Harry discovered that he liked fighting, both magically and mundanely, and grew very good at it. For him, there was nothing better than a good close-ranged combat. That's why he hated guns or any type of weapons that demanded distance between him and his enemy. John, had a shield and a sword, classical knight weaponry. Arrived at the school's auditorium, the trio separated to different seats. Rwby with her sister, whose name was apparently Young, he went to stand as far away from the stage as possible, while John, he didn't know where he was. The headmaster Ojban made his speech. I'll keep this brief. You have traveled here today in search of knowledge, to hone your craft and acquire new skills, and when you have finished, you plan to dedicate your life to the protection of the people. But I look amongst you, and all I see is wasted energy, in need of purpose, direction. You assume knowledge will free you of this, but your time at this school will prove that knowledge can only carry you so far. It is up to you to take the first step. Not the worst speech he heard, but it was way better than the one Dumbledore gave at the beginning of his very first year at Hogwarts. However, Harry got to have a proper look of the man who had been Salem's husband a long time ago. Ojban was a middle-aged man with tousled silver hair and thin brown eyes. He had a light complexion and sharp facial features. Surprisingly, Ojban the man had black eyebrows. Maybe he had black hair when he was younger. Who know and who care? He was wearing shaded glass spectacles and a small, purple, cross-shaped pin on the cowl around his neck. His outfit mainly consisted of an unzipped black suit over a dark green, buttoned vest and green shirt. He also wore black trouser shoes and long, dark green pants along with a cane. Harry's eyes had narrowed at the sight of the man. Then they were all dismissed by Glinda Goodwitch and they all left the area. Where was he now? Someone at Beacon, and all of them were preparing themselves for their first night at the academy. Harry chose the best spot to sleep, right near a window so he could look at the outside. He had been given, like the other students, sleeping bags so they wouldn't sleep on the hard ground. Harry wanted nothing more than to sleep, but then his eyes fell on a particular duo, Rwby Rose and her sister Yang Xiaolong. He didn't ask about the name or lack of resemblance, as it saw it as rude. It's like a big slumber party. Yang, the blonde, was saying to her sister, who was in her pajamas and with a sleeping mask around her head. She looked to be writing something, probably a journal. I don't think Dad would approve of all the boys, though, the younger girl replied to her while not looking back from her work. I know I do. Yang literally purred perversely as she stared at the surroundings young men. Some of them were shirtless, showing her, albeit accidentally, their muscles. Harry then frowned when he saw Yang looking disgusted about something, and he turned his head toward what she was looking at, only to quickly turn back to avoid laughing. There was John dressed in feti pajamas. Oh, how he wished to have a camera on him right now. Wait, he does. Pulling out his scroll, he took a quick picture before looking back at the girls when he heard Yang cooing to her younger sister. Ah, that's so cute, she managed to say before a pillow found itself launched at her face, courtesy of a red-faced Rwby. Shut up. I didn't get to take my friends with me to school. It's weird not knowing anyone here. What about John? He's nice. And what about this handsome guy with emerald green eyes and dark hair? Yang inquired her sister with encouragement at first before turning feral. Our hero felt a shiver pass through his body at the look. Harry? He is nice, but I just met him, Rwby answered to her older sister with sincerity, which caused Harry to smile slightly at her innocence. There you go. Plus 2 friends. That's 200% increase. Pretty sure Weiss counts as a negative friend. Back to 0, the younger girl retorted back with a sad sigh while turning on her back. Harry's eyes narrowed at the mention of Weiss, who was not only a Schnee but also a reminder of someone he despised in the past, Draco Malfoy. There's no such things as negative friends. You just made 2 friends and 1 enemy. Yang managed to say before being hit with another pillow. Look, it's only been 1 day, trust me, you've got friends all around you. You just haven't met them yet, the blonde added once she pulled the pillow away from her face. She is not wrong, Harry thought to himself with slight agreement at Yang's words. The two sisters then noticed a candle being lit nearby, and turned their heads to see a black-haired, amber-eyed girl leaning against a wall, reading her book. Harry glanced at the girl and he instantly knew, by her aura, that she was a fauness even if she was trying to hide it with the bow on her head. However, he quickly looked away when he saw Yang and Rwby approach the girl in question while the blonde was lifting her sister who was struggling to escape. Harry watched with amusement as the duo approached the girl who looked away from her book to stare at them. "Hello." Yang literally cooed to the amber-eyed girl. "Can I help you dash?" The unknown girl began to ask before her eyes landed on the younger sister. "Aren't you that girl from earlier?" The one Schnee was screaming on. Yeah. My name's Rwby." The young girl began to say before blinking. "Wait, you were there?" Of course, pretty much impossible to miss with how loud that girl was, the girl replied with a hint of humor in her tone. Harry couldn't help but snort in agreement at those words. "So what's your name?" Yang asked her, and the amber-eyed girl sighed deeply before answering. "Blake." Then she went back on her books. Harry couldn't help but seeing flashes of Hermione Granger, the bookworm and one of the people who betrayed him. The bushy-haired girl had also been a strong book lover. He himself was. "Well, Blake, I'm Yang, Ruby's older sister. I like your bow." Yang's sudden voice broke his little trance and he returned back to watching the trio. "Thanks." Now we could hear the irritation in Blake's tone. He could understand, he himself hated being interrupted when he read. "It goes great with your pajamas." Yang's new words caused Harry to slap himself on the forehead, muttering about idiots. "Right," Blake grumbled while not looking away from her book. "Nice night, don't you think?" Yang said in another attempt to create a conversation. "It, Yang, can't you see she doesn't want to talk right now?" Harry screamed to himself with annoyance as he rubbed his eyes. "Yes, it's lovely. Almost as lovely as this book," Blake began to say with clear contained irritation. The two sisters only stood there, watching her. "That I will continue to read." Again, they just stood there like statues. "As soon as you leave," Blake finished with impatience. If this wasn't a clear dismissal, then he was not called Harry James Potter. Harry watched as the two sisters whispered with one another until Rwby looked back at Blake. "What's it about?" The hidden fauness asked her with a surprised expression on her face. "Your book, does it have a name?" Rwby asked her more clearly. "Well, it's about a man with two souls, each fighting for control over his body." Blake's words caused Harry to stare at her with slight surprise. It reminded him of that day in Azkaban, right after one of the Dementors came to seek his soul. The moment he lost consciousness, he had found himself facing a piece of Voldemort's soul and they fought to have control of the body. In the end, he destroyed the piece of soul in him, and it was also the same day he lost that scar on his forehead. Shaking his head, the black-haired young man looked back at the girls when the sound of Blake's laugh reached his ears. "And why is that?" "Hoping you'll live happily ever after," the fauness was saying to Rwby with slight amusement and interest. "Well, I'm hoping we all will. As a girl, I wanted to be just like those heroes in the book, someone who fought for what was right, and protected people who couldn't protect themselves." Ruby's words caused not only her sister and Blake to smile but Harry as well. "She is Summer's daughter," he thought to himself with a chuckle as he remembered what he saw when he looked at her memories. "That's very ambitious for a child," Blake began to say with a smile before adding with a frown. "Unfortunately, the real world isn't the same as a fairy tale." A few seconds later, Rwby found herself being hugged by her sister. "Oh, I am so proud of my baby sister." Rwby, was struggling madly to escape her grip. "Cut it out." The little moment caused Blake to laugh a bit as she said those words. "Well, Rwby, Yang, it's a pleasure to dash." However, her words were quickly interrupted by someone unwelcome. Weiss Schnee. She was also in her pajamas and looked pretty angry. "What in the world is going on over here?" don't you realize some of us are trying to sleep? I was about to tell you the same thing, Schnee. Harry couldn't retain himself from hissing from his place. The four girls jumped in surprise at the voice before looking toward his spot, only to see a faint shape and shining emerald green eyes. Slowly getting up, Harry then stepped closer to them, glaring daggers at Weiss, who was now completely paralyzed. Young and Blake, along with Rwby, was looking at the scene in silence. If you are here to start giving orders to everyone or acting like a BRT, then I suggest you leave now. Harry snarled the last part in a calm tone, releasing a bit of his aura. Weiss quickly nodded her head before dashing away without looking back. Rwby looked at him with awe while her sister was eyeing him calculatingly, humming to herself. I'm sorry you had to see that, ladies. Good night to you all. Harry then said to Rwby, Young, and Blake in a knight-like manner before returning to his previous spot without waiting for an answer. The three girls only watched him as he made himself comfortable on his sleeping bag. A few seconds later, his eyes closed and he was asleep. Or so they thought, as he was actually faking. Well, maybe we should go to sleep too. Good night. Rwby said to both Young and Blake before dashing toward her one sleeping back. Young rolled her eyes at her sister's antic before going after her, leaving behind Blake, who had barely acknowledged Ruby's words as she was still looking at the young man who had so casually chased the Schnee heiress away. She didn't know why, but her instinct was screaming at her to get as far away from him as possible, which shouldn't be possible unless he was a dog faunus or a member of the canine family. Shaking her head, Blake simply closed her book, reached over to grab her candle before blowing it out. As the girls were slowly sleeping, they didn't saw Harry glancing at the outside where the moon could be seen shining. He stared at it for a moment before slowly letting sleep taking him. The second he closed his eyes, he sent his memories away, which headed straight toward the underworld. Elsewhere. At the same time, in the underworld, Harry/Thanatos was on his throne, waiting. His guest, Amber, was sleeping in the library, more precisely on the sofa. The Fall Maiden had read a lot of his books and had been present when he judged the souls that entered his domain today. She had been particularly amazed by everything she saw so far. Thanatos chuckled at the reminder, but then he felt memories entering his head. After a few seconds, a chuckle escaped his throat. His clone was doing a fine job. Apparently, tomorrow is the day of the initiation and he got to see the famous Ojbin. Strangely, he also got to meet Summer's daughters, Rwby and Young. But what had particularly caught his attention was the energy his clone felt at Beacon. Was it possible that Amber's body was there? If it was, then he needed to send his clone to investigate. But he could do that tomorrow. Even deities needed their beauty sleeps after all. As he headed toward his room, Thanatos' eyes shined as he said to himself. Soon, Amber, your body will be fine, and you, Cinder, I can't wait to properly meet you. Time skip. The next day, Harry James Potter woke up with a soft yawn. He had just received orders from his MSTR, and he will make sure to fulfill it. He will become a student of Beacon. He swore it on his name. Looking around, he noticed that he was among the first one to wake and silently left the area toward the locker room where he, and everyone else here, place his weapons. Harry smiled at the blades for a moment before unsheathing them. Once it was done, he left the area to take a look around. He wanted some peace and quiet before all hell could start. As he walked into a hall, he couldn't but stopping as he once again felt the magical aura. It was without a doubt coming from underground and wanted nothing more than to go and investigate. But his current mission was to become a student. Only then, he will have the chance to do it. Turning his eyes toward the nearest window, the young man looked through the glasses to stare at the sky. How he missed the blue sky! Sure, the sky in the underworld was nice to stare at, but it was not as close than the one he had always known. The sky, each time he looked at it, he remembered the joy of the wind against his face as he rode his broom back when he was still a Quidditch player. He had stopped it after his incarceration at Akaban, but he would sometimes sneak away to enjoy a little flight every now and then. That or Sirius would send the both of them out of England to have fun. Usually it was in the Caribbeans or Bahamas Islands. He didn't know how long he had been standing there staring at the sky, but his little trance was broken by the familiar voice of Glinda echoing through the intercom system. Would all first year students please report to Beacon Cliff for initiation? Again, all first-year students report to Beacon Cliff immediately. Hearing this, our hero nodded to himself before making his way out of the hall he was in to go straight toward the location in question. A few minutes later, he was standing alongside many other teenagers, on the cliff in question. As they all stood on silver tiles, Harry watched as the cliff overlooking a large forest. Then he looked back toward the two people standing in front of the students, Ojben and Glinda. The former had a mug in his hand while the latter had a tablet. For years, you have trained to become warriors, and today, your abilities will be evaluated in the Emerald Forest. Ojben said to the teenagers before taking a sip of his mug. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard rumors about the assignment of teams. Well, allow us to put an end to your confusion. Each of you will be given teammates today. Glinda added in a serious tone on her face. Yep, she was definitely the Minerva McGonagall of this world. What? Oh, Rwby's voice echoed behind him, but he couldn't turn around to look at her as Ojben spoke again. These teammates will be with you for the rest of your time here at Beacon, so it is in your best interest to be paired with someone with whom you can work well. Harry smirked when he heard Rwby groaning behind him. That being said, the first person you make eye contact with after landing will be your partner for the next 4 years. Ojben's next words caused Say Girl to shout with shock. What? Our hero snickered to himself but then looked back at the headmaster when he spoke again. The man either didn't heard the girl or simply ignored it. After you've partnered up, make your way to the northern end of the forest. You will meet opposition along the way. Do not hesitate to destroy everything in your path or you will die. Well, at least he is honest, unlike Dumbledore, Harry thought to himself with scowl. Dumbledore thought it was a good idea to literal tell teenagers to not got there. Surely he would know that it was just an invitation. You will be monitored and graded through the duration of your initiation, but our instructors will not intervene. You will find an abandoned temple at the end of the path containing several relics. Each pair must choose one and return to the top of the cliff. We will regard that item, as well as your standing, and grade you appropriately. Are there any questions? Ojben explained to the teenagers before him. Yes, sir. John's voice echoed from nearby, but when Harry tried to look for him, he couldn't find him. Good. Now, take your positions. Ojben ordered them, ignoring John's intervention completely. Harry's eyes narrowed at him. Does the guy was that eager to see young people get hurt and or possibly killed? Harry's eyes then looked at the other people who were all striking a pause on their tiles. Some of them looked simply ridiculous, but he didn't have time to say something when he was launched in the air. However, the surprise quickly turned into pleasure as he felt the wind ruffling his black hair. It was exhilarating to be airborne again. However, that didn't mean he would not allow himself to crash against the ground. Closing his eyes, Harry focused on his hands and feet, and soon enough, he was floating in the air. Smirking, the young man slowly descended and stopped the moment his feet touched the ground. That was fun, I dare say. Now where should I go? He muttered to himself before looking around. Let's see, Harry whispered before his eyes shined brightly. Unseen to humans' eyes, he had sent a small wave similar to echolocation, and soon enough a grin grew on his face. Why? Because he now knew where everyone was. Even better, he now knew where creatures of Grimm were along with where the relics are kept. No wanting to be bothered in his quest, he unleashed a portion of his aura, a bit small to his opinion but was still enough, and each time a Grimm was close it would flee in terror at him. That, and they knew of his connection with their MSTRS. Now who should be my partner? He muttered to himself as a massive Ursa ran away from him with a whimper. For a moment, Harry walked through a world of trees, grasses, and bushes, and he was beginning to wonder if his power of detection wasn't a bit outdated. Why? Because he didn't meet anyone yet. Ojben had been clear about it. Without a partner you have almost no chance to attend Beacon Academy. His MSTR had been pretty insistent about it, and he didn't want to frustrate him at all. Well, scratch that, he didn't want to fail himself. After all, even if he was here and his main body in the underworld, they were still the same. Normally, people would think it is odd to be at two places at the same time, but he was death. Death was and still is everywhere. Anyway, back to present, Harry was still looking around, hoping to find someone. His aura had diminished a bit by now, but it was strong enough to scare the creatures of Grimm. He was about to use his powers again when he heard a voice. A voice he didn't want it to hurt at all. It's definitely this way, I mean this way. It's definitely this way. Alright, it's official, we passed it. It was Weiss's voice. Great. Just great. Of all people, it had to be the Schnee girl. He must be cursed somehow. But then he heard another voice, a familiar one as well, and she sounded annoyed. Weiss, why can't you just admit that you have no idea where we're going? It was Ruby Rose. Now he felt sympathetic about the young girl. Well, better her than him, because he had become Weiss's partner, he would have killed the girl already. Because I know exactly where we're going. We're going to the forest temple. Weiss's voice echoed again. Hidden by the shadows of the trees, he could see the two were clearly ready to lunge at each other's throat. The young man was conflicted of either leave them be or going to them. His thoughts were interrupted by the girls, who started bickering again. Oh, stop it. You don't know where we are, either. Weiss hissed to Ruby in a somewhat angry tone. Well, at least I'm not pretending like I know everything. Ruby retorted back in an equal tone. What is that supposed to mean? It means you're a big, stupid JRK and I hate you. Just keep moving. Weiss snarled in frustration, clearly fed up. Oh, just keep moving. Hurry up. Wah. Watch where you're going. Ruby began to say in a mock imitation of Weiss, to which Harry gave her a 9.5 out of 10, before adding in her normal tone, why are you so bossy? I'm not bossy. Don't say things like that. Stop treating me like a kid. Stop acting like a kid. Well, stop acting like you're perfect. I'm not perfect. Not yet, but I'm still leagues better than you. Those words caused Harry to lose his cool, and he stepped out of the bushes with a look of anger on his face. Are you sure about that, Schnee? He snarled at the girl while crossing his arms over his chest. The sound of his voice caused both Ruby and Weiss to stare at him with surprise. Harry? The younger of the two cried out in shock at seeing him. He gave her a nod before glaring back at Weiss, who took a step backward, a bit afraid of him. How long have you listening to us? She managed to ask him in a shaky tone. Long enough. We could hear your annoying voice from the other side of this forest. Harry answered her with a growl as his emerald green eyes brightened a bit. Weiss and Ruby winced at the harsh tone before looking down at the grounds in embarrassment and shame. If someone walked in, they would think they were two kids being grounded by an adult. Ruby, I am not mad at you, and in fact I wish you all the luck of the world because you will clearly need it, Harry said to the younger of the two while glancing at Weiss at the last part. Hey! Snow White cried out in outrage before recoiling at the glare he gave her. And you, stop acting like a BRT and grow up. Nothing will be handed to you on a silver platter, and Daddy is not here to save him from harm. Weiss looked a bit angry at the mention of her father, but she did flinch at the remonstrance. Nodding in satisfaction, the young man then took a deep breath before adding in a calm but stern tone. I must leave you now, still have a partner to look for, but if I heard one more thing from you. The menace was clear, and they quickly nodded their heads in understanding before dashing away from there, leaving him alone. Let's hope they learned their lesson, Harry muttered to himself with a scowl before walking away from there as well. Poor Ruby, I don't envy her, he added to himself while glancing at where the two girls disappeared. Weiss looked to be a total BRT and someone who clearly have a big head. She was clearly a female version of Draco Malfoy. Ruby's hands will be full with that one, as well as whoever will become their teammates. A shiver passed through his body at this. Well, as he said earlier, better her than him. Shaking his head to clear his mind, Harry decided to go straight toward where the relics were kept, hoping to encounter someone on the way there. During his little walk, he did encounter some grim Beowulfs, Ursas, and the likes, but they all mostly left him alone or flee away from him as if the devil himself was on their tails. After a few minutes, and after getting rid of his aura, he stepped out of some bushes and found himself facing what looked like an abandoned temple. The smaller part of the temple seemed to be mostly consisted of the broken ruins of a rotunda, while the floor of the structure bared a symmetrical-like design. 3 of the columns were broken and were laying around the area in pieces. There were 5 stone columns still standing that hold up a circle of stones though. Close to the temple were more ruins. They mostly consisted of stone towers and stone bridges situated over a large chasm. A stone bridge led to a large central tower, while smaller towers surrounded the main tower and seemed to be connected by long stone pillar-lined walkways. However, he quickly looked away from the temple to stare at the 2 figures present. 2 figures he recognized as Yang Xiaolong and the Faunus Blake. One of them seemed to be holding a chess piece. Harry stared at it for a second before slapping his face. Really? Chess pieces as relics? Surely there was a better way to form the teams. At Hogwarts, people were sorted thanks to a hat and sent to their proper houses. Harry sighed deeply before stepping closer with a smile on his face. I hope there is still some relics left. Young and Blake, at the sound of his voice, turned his head to look at him. Hello there, handsome, the blonde literally purred at the sight of him while Blake's eyes narrowed slightly. I don't think we properly met. My name's Harry James Potter. A pleasure to meet you, fair maidens, Harry said with a small reverence. Young raised an eyebrow at this before laughing a bit, while Blake rolled her eyes in amusement even if there was a bit of pink on her cheeks. You are definitely a keeper. No wonder Rwby likes you. I'm Yang Xiaolong, her older sister, the blonde responded to him with a friendly smile. I know that already, I kinda hear your conversation last night, sorry about that, he said with an embarrassed chuckle. DMN, I didn't realize we were that loud, Yang whispered in equal embarrassment. Blake, nodded at her partner's words. Not as much as the Schnee girl but close, Harry replied with a small grin. The Faunus snorted at this while Young shot him a small glare. Speaking of which, I saw her with your sister. Young blinked at those words before grimacing, I don't envy her. Me too. Me three, Blake said with a nod and a small shiver. Anyway, where is your partner? Young asked him curiously while glancing around. I don't have one yet, a part of Schnee and Rwby, I didn't see anyone, Harry replied with a soft sigh. Blake shot him a look of sympathy while Young patted his head in comfort. He shot them both a soft smile before looking over at the chess pieces. Well, might as well pick one, don't you think? They both nodded before stepped out of his way as he walked toward the relics. After a few seconds, he picked the Black King piece. Why? Because he was the king of the underworld after all. So what now? He asked the two girls with a raised brow. Maybe we can wait for the Yang began to answer when a girlish scream echoed in the air. Some girls in trouble. Harry, Blake, did you both hear that? The blonde asked the two. Pretty hard no too unless I'm deaf, which I'm sure I'm not, Harry replied with a small grin on his face. The blonde girl snorted at this with amusement clear on her face while Blake was looking at something in the sky, completely ignoring the two. Blake, did you hear that? Young repeated to her partner after receiving an answer from the mysterious amber-eyed girl. Blake still ignored her and was still looking at the sky. What should we do? Young asked Harry instead, who was about to answer when a loud cry coming from above caught their attention. Heads you up. Looking up, Yang's and Harry's eyes widened when they saw Rwby falling from the sky. However, before one of them could act accordingly, another figure appeared, John. The guy came flying out of nowhere, crashing into Rwby before sending the both of them into a tree. Harry quickly rushed over to them and found the two hanging on a tree with John hanging upside down in a branch above Rwby. Hey guys, are you alright? Harry called out to them with some worry. Ever since he met the two aka the day before, he grew slightly attached, especially toward Rwby, who was innocence incarnate. The young girl looked to be dazed by the crash but somewhat fine. "Ooh, what was that?" she grumbled to herself as she shook her head to regain her composure. "Hey Rwby," John's voice echoed from above and she looked up to see him, waving at her from his place. "Did your sister just fall from the sky?" Blake asked Young with a somewhat shocked look on her face. The blonde was about to answer when several crashing noises were heard coming from the forest ahead of them. Then an Ursa came out, claws swiping, just as a pink blast of energy hit it in the back and it crashed to the ground, depositing its rider. "Yee haha," the newcomer said as she rolled off the grim. However, she quickly became sad once she get up. "Aw, it's broken." The newcomer was a fair-skinned young woman with orange hair and aqua-blue eyes who wears a collared black sleeveless vest with her emblem on the back of it, with a blue central front section with red accents. Under the vest, she had a white sleeveless t-shirt with a heart-shaped cutout above her BRST line in the center accompanied with a pair of white detached sleeves on each arm, and a pair of light pink fingerless gloves. In addition, she had a short pink skirt with a single white layer under it. Her white ankle boots had pink soles with part of her emblem, a lightning bolt, on them and low heels with pink laces. The tops were folded over revealing the pink lining. As if it wasn't enough, she had a silver armor piece that wraps around her waist, under her melons and around the back on her neck with metal connecting each piece together at the front. As the new girl observed the carcass of the Ursa, someone else entered the fray. It was a young man with long black hair ending midway down his back with a magenta streak on the left side along with pink eyes. He was wearing a dark green, diagonally buttoned, long-sleeved tailcoat that was red on the inside, with black and gold trimming and pink cuffs. The trimming was going down the right side of his torso and formed a black collar. Along with this, he had a black, long-sleeved shirt beneath the suit and light tan pants with black shoes. His hair was tied back in a low ponytail. They all watched as he leaning against the Ursa's corpse, panting in exhaustion. "Nora. Please don't ever do that again," he managed to say before looking at the beast back only to see that the girl wasn't here anymore. Looking around frantically, he soon found her looking at the relics in the temple, more precisely at the golden pieces. When her eyes landed on the golden rook, she grabbed it before dancing around. "I'm queen of the castle. I'm queen of the castle," Nora sang to herself as she jumped around with the piece in her hands. "Nora." The boy called out to her from his place. "Coming, run," Nora said as she stopped dancing before rushing toward him to stand by his side. Harry stared blankly at the girl. She looked even more energetic than Rwby. Now he felt sympathy for the guy. Did that girl just ride in on an Ursa? Blake asked her partner again with shock. Young began to say inly to interrupted again by a screech coming from their right, and another girl came onto the fray as a gigantic scorpion-like grim destroyed trees in its chase after her. The girl dodged its giant claws and kept on running. She was a tall and muscular fair-skinned young woman with red hair and vivid green eyes that reminded Harry of his dead mother Lily. The newcomer was wearing her red hair in a waist-length ponytail, curled slightly into a loose ringlet. She also wore light green eyeshadow around the far upper corners of her green eyes. The redhead was wearing a brown overbust corset with a vertical strp of lighter brown in the center. Additionally, she had an elastic, black, A-line mini skirt and brown opera-length gloves on both arms. She also had a red ankle-length sash that wrapped around her skirt. There was a small circular bronze plate where her emblem could be seen on it on her right peach, opposite two pouches with both connected to a belt. Underneath her hair, she had a brown circlet adorned with a pair of small, green, teardrop-shaped emeralds on thin chains. She was also wearing a large bronze gorget around her neck and a bronze bracelet on the upper half of her left arm. Harry noted that unlike the other girls present, the redhead had an armor on her, bronze greaves that started below her mid-thigh before continuing downwards into her boots. She also had a bronze bracer atop the sleeve on her left arm. Her high-heeled boots were brown in color with bronze trim, matching her skirt and sleeves and reaching up to mid-calf. She looked like a Spartan would in ancient Greece. "John," the redhead called out to the blonde still hanging on the tree he crashed on earlier. Pyrrha, the guy called back, and Harry instantly understood that the two of them were partners. However, he quickly focused back on the scorpion Grim with narrowed eyes, completely missing the fact Rwby was running off of the branch she laid on previously, or John's whines. Rwby landed on the ground, and the second she got up, someone called out to her, "Rwby." Turning her head, she saw her older sister approaching her and became excited again, YNG. As the two sisters approached one another with raised arms, someone come between the two, knocking them off balance. Nora. Harry glanced at the scene with slight amusement before looking back at the girl, Pyrrha, who was still being chased by the scorpion Grim. Sighing deeply, he unsheathed his blades before rushing forward. A few seconds later, the massive dark scorpion stopped dead in its tracks before falling heavily to the ground, its body cut into several pieces. Its prey, Pyrrha, turned around to stare at the carcass in shock before looking at the one who just killed it, Harry James Potter. The young man was staring at the body with boredom as he twirled his blades in his hands before putting them back in their sheaths in a quick motion. Far too easy, he grumbled to himself before looking at everyone who were staring at him in shock. What? Did she just run all the way here with a Death Stalker on her tail? Blake asked Young while pointing at Pyrrha before looking at Harry with shock. And did he just kill it in a second? Young, instead of answering, became really angry as her hair turned into literal flames while her lilac eyes turned BLD red. I can't take it anymore. Can everyone just chill out for 2 seconds before something crazy happens again? A few seconds after her short outburst, Young calmed down while Ren ran to a dizzy Nora. DMN, and here I thought only redheads had such a short temper, Harry commented with slight amusement, and some snickers could be heard from some of the people present. Pyrrha and Young thought shot him small glares, but he only smiled back at them while Blake and Rwby suddenly looked at the sky. The young girl then approached her sister before tugging on her sleeves. Young. Rwby said while pointing at the sky. Looking up, they all saw Weiss Schnee hanging on a talon the size of her entire body that belongs to a gigantic crow-like Grim. How could you leave me? The Ice Queen called out to Rwby from her place. I said, jump. Rwby shouted back to her. She's gonna fall, Blake commented while looking at the Schnee heiress. Please do. Harry said with hope shining in his emerald eyes, which caused Blake to glance at him with amusement. She'll be fine. Rwby denied it with a shake of her head. She's falling, Ren commented with a blank tone. Yes. Harry cried out in joy at the sight of Weiss jumped off the dark bird's talon. However, his joy turned into disappointment when John jumped off the branch with arms outstretched to catch her. Then the two fall HRD on the ground with Weiss sitting on John's back. My hero, the Ice Queen said mockingly while John groaned in pain. My back. Harry laughed loudly at that, and Weiss shot him a dirty look, which was completely ignored. Pyrrha instantly rushed over to help her partner while Weiss brushed herself as if getting rid of dust and dirt off her. The universe must be against us to allow her to live. Harry whined as he pointed at Weiss. Hey! The heiress cried out in outrage, and everyone laughed at this until a roar caused everyone to stare back at the crow-like Grim still flying above them. Guys? That thing's circling back. What are we gonna do? John asked everyone with worry. Look, there's no sense in dilly-dallying, our objective is right in front of us. Weiss said while looking at the relics. Harry would never admit it, but he was in agreement with the Schnee girl. She's right. Our mission is to grab an artifact and make it back to the cliffs. Rwby said before giving a nod at the heiress, adding. There's no point in fighting this thing. Run and live. That's an idea I can get behind. John quickly agreed with the plan, much to Harry's amusement. While Rwby and John picked their pieces Gold Knight and Gold Rook respectively, Harry was still eyeing the Grim above them, making sure that it wouldn't attack. His aura was not unleashed so the creatures of Grim could freely attack him. Time we left. Ren announced to the group while glancing at the dark bird above them. Right, let's go. Rwby waved to everyone before going forward. Except for a proud-looking young and somewhat sad Harry. Blake, noticing her partner staying behind, approached her. "What is it?" "Nothing," Yang said to her partner while looking at her sister before following the group. Blake smiled at her partner before glancing at Harry. "Aren't you coming?" "Why should I?" "I don't have a partner," the young man replied with a shrug. Blake looked at him with sympathy before putting a hand on his shoulder. "I know, but we are not leaving without you." "Blake." "Harry." "You coming?" Ruby's voice echoed from afar. Blake and Harry shared a look of amusement before rushing after the group. Time skip. The group was heading out of the forest, walking into another abandoned series of ruins as the crow-like Grimm still followed them from the air. It didn't try to attack them at first, but the second they stepped into a clearing, it dived down. The group spread out before hiding behind some stone blocks while the dark bird perched on a high column, cawing. "Well, that's great." Yang grumbled in annoyance. "What are we gonna do about it?" "He is not gonna leave us alone." John asked everyone with panic. Harry went deep in thought for a moment before his face brightened. "I have an idea." "What?" they all asked him in perfect synchronization. "You will see, he, Harry replied in dark glee before cackling. "Hey, what are you doing?" Weiss asked him with shock as he stepped out of his hiding place to reveal himself to the Nevermore. "Come back." Pyrrha, Yang and Ruby all said at the same time while looking at him with wide eyes. Harry ignored them all as he looked at the Nevermore, who upon seeing him, cawed loudly before flying toward him. "Harry!" Ruby called out in alarm as she tried to rush to him only to be stopped by her sister. The young man waited for a few seconds before unleashing a good portion of his aura while unsheathing his blades, going into an intimidating pose. The Nevermore stopped in mid-air, cawing in fright as it looked at the young man. "Get out of here, you big feather bag!" Harry roared in a deep tone, his emerald green eyes became literal green fires. The Nevermore cawed loudly in fear before flying away as far away from him as possible. Sighing deeply, Harry pulled his blades back to their sheaths before facing back the group who were all staring at him with wide eyes of shock, fear and amazement. "What? What was that?" John asked him with disbelief. "I never saw a Grimm afraid before." Pyrrha commented while looking at him with amazement. "How did you do it?" Nora and Ruby asked him at the same time. "I never have so many goosebumps before now," Yang admitted while shivering a bit. Ren and Blake stared at him with interest, curiosity, and slight fear. "I just used my semblance. It's called intimidation. When I used it, people become scared of me," Harry explained to them in a calm tone along with a shrug. They seemed to buy his little lie because they all nodded their heads in understanding even if Ruby and Nora were still looking at him with stars in their eyes. Weiss, however, looked at him with suspicions clear on her face but he ignored it. "Well, that was a thing." Yang commented with a smile and a thumb up. Harry smiled at them all before the little group resumed their main quest, happy to not have this Nevermore on their trail. Time skip. Harry was now seating in an auditorium watching as Ojbin was making the teams. "Russell Thrush Carden Winchester Dove Bronzewing Skylark," the old man began to say as the screen behind him showed each of their profiles while the boys in question were lined up for the applauding audience. "The four of you retrieved the Black Bishop pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team CRDL, led by Carden Winchester." Cheers echoed from the audience as the four left the stage. Harry was not among them as he looked at the four with narrowed eyes. Their arrogant looks clearly told him they weren't good people, so he decided to keep an eye on them. Taking their places were four people Harry recognized instantly. John Arc Lyra and Pyrrha Nikos Nora Valkyrie. "The four of you retrieved the White Rook pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team JNPR." Ojbin announced loudly to the audience who cheered loudly for the four while Nora gave Ren a big hug. However, Ojbin's new words caused Harry to become shocked. "Led by John Arc. Congratulations, young man." A grinning Pyrrha offered him a friendly shoulder bump, but her new leader got knocked over, which ended up with him falling to his butt in front of the laughing audience. Harry himself had allowed a chuckle to escape his mouth. Then the next group climbed the stage and our hero smiled at the sight of Rwby, Blake, Weiss and Yang lining up in front of everyone. Blake, Belladonna, Rwby, Rose, Weiss, Schnee, Yang, Xiao Long, the four of you retrieved the White Knight pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team Rwby. Led by Rwby, Rose. Harry clapped for the girls as a shocked Rwby found herself hugged by her sister. Weiss, looked surprised and didn't say anything. Thank you, sir, but what about Harry? Rwby asked the headmaster with concern clear in her tone. Blake and Yang were equally concerned as were the members of Team JNPR. He didn't get a partner after all. Lastly, Harry James Potter. Please come up the stage. Ojpin called out to the young man in question. Team Rwby stepped aside as our hero slowly made his way up the stage, ignoring the murmurs and whispers coming from the audience as he went to stand in front of the headmaster. Mr. Potter, since you didn't make eye contact with anyone during the initiation, you would normally be disqualified from entering Beacon, Ojpin began to say in a neutral tone. Harry nodded his head in understanding, but inside he was saddened to have failed his mission. But how can I let such a talented young man like you not join us after what you did? Ojpin added with a smile as the screen behind them showed two particular scenes to the audience. How he literally cut to pieces the massive scorpion Grim, or how he used his semblance to scare a gigantic Nevermore. Impressed murmurs came from the audience. Glinda gave him a slight nod to which he returned out of respect. For the first time in the history of this academy, you shall be the first solo team. Congratulations, young man. Ojpin said with a tiny smile, and cheers echoed again from the crowd. Harry smiled as he found himself crowded by both Team Rwby and JNPR as they congratulated him. Rwby hugged him around the waist with Yang and Nora joining him while Ren and John patted him on the shoulders. Blake and Pyrrha both nodded in approval while Weiss stayed mostly silent. Maybe she was still unhappy to not be team leader. Ojpin watched the scene with a soft smile before taking a sip of his mug. It looks like things are shaping up to be an interesting year. Harry, however, heard him and couldn't but internally smirking. You have no idea, old man, he thought to himself with hidden glee before refocusing back on the people surrounding him. Mission accomplished. The embodiment of death was pleased with this new development once his clone sent him memories of the initiation and his new attendance at one of the most prestigious schools on Remnant. After the short moment of joy, Thanatos then ordered him to keep a low profile while searching for Amber's body. Speaking of the Fall Maiden, she had congratulated him once the news reached her ears, and the incarnation of death had smiled at her, touched by the words. Salem also congratulated him but also questioned him of what he planned to do about Cinder Fall, to which Thanatos replied that she didn't have to worry about that and to instead keep searching for the remaining relics. Meanwhile, at Beacon, Harry became the center of attention for being the first solo team in Beacon's history, but no one dared to approach him except two teams he grew to appreciate the company of, Team Rwby and Team JNPR. They quickly became his friends, and Harry was happy because those people weren't like the people from in his BRTH universe. He knew they would not betray him like Ron and Hermione did in the past. Weiss was a total BRT at first, but as the time passed, she became more tolerable, maybe because she apparently had a talk with Ojpin after the fiasco that was Professor Port's class where she had to fight a Borbatusk. He remembered that day pretty well. Professor Port was in short Professor Lockhart but more serious. He was the one who asked the students who possessed the qualities of a huntsman, and Weiss said she was. The heiress had been pretty snappy after the team announcement, clearly furious to have been made team leader. Rwby had tried to help her, but it only angered the girl. Sure, she defeated the Grimm but had been angry with her leader, something many had seen. Anyway, Harry had later apologized for his behavior toward her, admitting that he had been pretty wrong, but the girl said it was fine as she could understand why he acted like he did. With a father like Jacques Schnee, you must either think and talk like him or being seen as a nuisance. And with her being the heiress of the SDC. A few weeks later, Harry had to face another problem, John Arc. The blonde guy was nice and friendly but seemed to have no training before attending Beacon, which was seen during his little session with Carden Winchester, a total bully with total disgust to any faunus around. It was during a class session with Glinda Goodwitch and she had chosen the two for a duel. In the end, Carden won pretty easily in fact. Carden had almost slammed John down if it wasn't for the teacher. Harry hadn't turned his eyes once from the guy even after the duel. However, he had to when they all went toward another part of the academy, the cafeteria. The food there wasn't bad, at least in Harry's opinion, but even he had to admit it could find better outside school grounds. Back to present, as Team RWBY, Team JNPR and Harry were sitting around a table, Nora was telling a story. So, there we were, in the middle of the night. It was day, Ren's voice said from beside him. We were surrounded by Ursas, Nora retorted as if she didn't hear him, but not all people were listening to her. In fact, Blake was reading a book, Weiss was filing her nails, Harry was staring at something only himself could see, and John was messing with his food. The others were listening to every words, either it was to be polite or they were captivated by the story. They were Beowulfs. Dozens of them. Two of them, Ren sighed at this part but still calm about it. It was at this moment that Pyrrha and Rwby both looked toward John with concern clear on their faces. But they were no match, and in the end, Ren and I took them down and made a boatload of lean selling Ursa skin rugs. Nora finished with a bright smile. She's been having this recurring dream for nearly a month now, Ren sighed deeply as he looked at everyone present. However, Pyrrha ignored it as she looked at her team leader. John. Are you okay? She asked him with concern. The blonde guy, who was in deep though, suddenly snapped out of it at the sound of Pyrrha's voice and quickly looked at her. Huh? Oh, yeah. Why? It was Rwby who responded, it's just that you seem a little not okay. Everyone present in the group stared at him at this point, waiting for his answer, all except Harry, or so it seems. Our hero was eyeing the center of Beacon Academy, wondering how he could enter there before an idea came into his mind. Maybe Ashbin or a member of the staff could help by leading him to wherever Amber was kept. It was a good plan, but he had to wait for the perfect opportunity. Thanks to him being what he was, he could approach someone without being detected even if it was a faunus. But then he thought about something else, Cinder. He had to find her, but how? He frowned for a moment, but then he remembered something. Didn't Salem say something about Cinder working with Torchwick? He internally smirked at this. All he had to do was to find Roman and he will find the girl. But then his thoughts were interrupted by cries of pain coming from nearby. Blinking, he turned his head toward where it came from, only to growl in anger by what he saw. Carden Winchester was tugging on the ears of a rabbit faunus. Ow! That hurts. Please stop. The girl pleaded in pain, but Carden ignored her as he laughed at her pain while looking at his comrades. I told you it was real, he said to his team, who laughed loudly. What a freak, one of them, Russell, said in agreement to his leader's words. Harry's mind snapped at the word freak, and the cries of pain from the girl made him think back of the time he lived with the Dursleys. Without a word, he got up of his seat before approaching them. Harry? Where are you doing? He heard his friends calling out for him, but he ignored them as his whole attention was focused on Carden and his dogs. He stopped right behind the guy with a glare that could melt ice. Russell and the other two noticed him and paled a bit, but Carden didn't, at least until he saw their faces. Around them, everyone in the cafeteria was staring at the scene with anticipation. Guys? Why are you so pale? Carden asked them with a frown of confusion. Russell gulped in fear before using a finger to point at something behind him. The second Carden turned around to face, Harry's released a large portion of his aura, a bit more than during the initiation. His green eyes were now living green fires and his whole body was now nothing more than a big shadow. The result was instantaneous. Everyone was now staring at him with pure fear and many were sweating profusely while paling drastically. Carden Winchester, Harry began to say in a cold tone that caused many to shiver in fright. Why yes, the bully spluttered with wide eyes of fear. Release her now. Harry ordered him sternly, and Carden quickly released his grip on the girl's ears. "Now Winchester, give me one reason why I shouldn't beat you to a pulp," our hero asked him with a snarl that caused Team CRDL to recoil in fear. "Please don't beat me. I will do anything you want. I swear." Carden went to his knees, begging. "Anything?" "Yes. Anything." Carden replied while nodding his head repeatedly. A dark smirk grew on Harry's face, which caused many to pale ever more because of how malicious he now looked with it. "Well then, I'm in the mood for a game." A game?" Russell asked him shakily. "Yes, you run, I chase you, and if I catch you," Harry's smirk widened slightly as he added with dark glee, "you will end up in the infirmary." Carden and his team all paled at those words and were shaking uncontrollably now. "Tic-tac," Harry cooed darkly, and they quickly fled the scene. "Run! Run far, children! Make this more fun for me!" Our hero yelled sadistically from his place before dashing after them. The moment he left, many people were staring at the cafeteria's entrance with wide eyes, and a few seconds later, they all breathed loudly in relief once the dark aura they felt was gone. "Well, that was interesting," Ren said after a moment of silence. "This semblance of his sure is terrifying," Weiss commented with a shiver as around her, nods of agreement followed her words. "But it was so cool," Rwby and Nora both said at the same time with stars in their eyes. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I almost feel bad for those guys," Yang managed to say from her place, which caused many to look at her with disbelief. "I said, almost." Blake, was still looking at the rabbit faunus with sympathy while being thankful for Harry to have saved her from those bullies. Speaking of the guy, he came back barely a few seconds later, laughing loudly with amusement. At the sight of him, many students froze in fright, scared. However, they quickly noticed the lack of dark aura or the anger he felt when he left. Instead, he looked amused. "First time I saw people running that fast," he said to himself before making his way toward the rabbit faunus girl. The girl in question also froze at the sight of him and quickly closed her eyes, as if waiting for something bad to happen to her. But then she blinked when she heard him ask her, "Are you okay, miss?" Looking up, the faunus could see the concern shining in those emerald eyes of his. With a slight blush, she whispered a "yes" while wincing as she touched the ear Carden tugged on earlier. Harry, noticing this, reached out to it while glancing at her. "Do you mind?" Unsure for a moment, the rabbit faunus slowly nodded her head, and she flinched when she felt his hand touching her ear. However, she then in pleasure as he started to pet it, gently. The pain melted away at his touch. "It'd feel good," she whispered to herself before blushing madly once she realized she had said this out loud. "He won't bother you again now, I made sure of it, miss," Harry explained to her kindly before pausing as he didn't know her name. Velvet Scarlatina," she whispered softly and shyly to her savior. "Appealing name you have, Miss Scarlatina," Harry commented with a small smile which caused her to blush even more. "Harry James Potter, a pleasure to meet you, fair maiden," our hero said while taking one of her hands and kissing it on the back. Velvet's face was now a blushing mess, and streams could almost be seen coming out of her ears at this point. Around them, many girls silently squealed as how chivalrous he was acting, and some girls were even shouting envious glares at some guys who recoiled from it. "I shall leave you to your meal now, milady. Don't hesitate to fetch me if Carden causes you troubles," he said to her with a small bow before walking back toward his friends, leaving behind a red-faced rabbit faunus. Many girls in the cafeteria were looking at him with hearts in their eyes, and the female faunus all looked at him with appreciation for saving one of them. As he sat with his friends, Harry noticed their stares and blinked in confusion. "What? You didn't break any legs?" Nora hissed with disappointment. "You do know you will be in trouble if those ruffians told a teacher, right?" Weiss asked him with a raised brow, ignoring Nora's intervention. "And why should I care?" Harry asked her back with a raised brow of his own. "Aren't you afraid of being expelled?" Pyrrha asked him with concern clear on her face. If the headmaster expel me just for helping a fellow student, then this school isn't worth it. Those bullies should be punished, not the one who scared them away, Harry explained with a shrug. No one had an answer for that and instead glanced at one another. He wasn't totally right, the bullies should be punished, not the one who helped the victim. Anyway, I didn't know you were a SDST. Young asked him to change the subject. I'm not, I just love scaring people from time to time, he answered with a tiny smirk and a wink. And with that semblance of yours it is quite effective, Ren commented from his seat with a nod of understanding. As the group talked, they didn't notice John looking at Harry with envy. Why am I not as cool as him, he thought to himself as he sighed to himself. Then he moved on with his tray table, leaving them behind. However, Harry saw him leaving and wondered what was going on with the blonde guy. Time skip. Harry was sitting beside Team Rwby as he listened to Professor Oblek's lecture about the faunus right's evolution. Our hero was once disgusted by the fact humanity tried to relocate every faunus on a small island called Menagerie. Shooting a glance toward another part of the classroom, Harry was not surprised to see Team CRDL having sneers on their faces. Now, while this must feel like ancient history to many of you, it is imperative to remember that these are relatively recent events. Why, the repercussions of the uprising can still be seen to this day. The teacher explained to the class before taking a sip of his coffee. Now, have any among you been subjugated or discriminated because of your faunus heritage? The old man then asked the assistants with narrowed eyes. Harry watched with some pain and sympathy as some of the people present all raised their hands. Velvet, who was present, looked unsure, but after seeing the kind look Harry sent her way, she did the same. Dreadful, simply dreadful. Remember, students, it is precisely this kind of ignorance that breeds violence. Professor Oblek retorted with disappointment before taking another sip of his coffee. I mean, just look at what happened to White Fang. Now, which one of you young scholars can tell me what many theorize to be the turning point in the third year of the war? He then asked the students before spotting someone's hand in the assistants. Yes. The Battle of Fort Castle. It was Weiss's voice. Precisely. And who can tell me the advantage the faunus had over General Lagoon's forces? Harry's eyes then caught movement on his side and turned his head to see Carden about to toss a ball of paper at someone. Without thinking, he said loudly. Carden, if you throw that ball, I'll send you to the infirmary before you have time to call your mother for help. Everyone, Professor Oblek included, quickly looked toward Carden, who was about to toss the ball at John but had froze when Harry's loud voice echoed in the classroom. Looking around, he saw that every student present were looking at him and his face slowly turned red in embarrassment. Mr. Winchester, if you do not want to go see the headmaster, I suggest you get rid of what you have in your hands. The teacher said sternly to the young man, who grumbled something under his breath before doing what he was told by throwing the ball in a trash can. Meanwhile, John sent a thankful look at Harry, who nodded secretly at him while watching in amusement as Carden went back to his seat, shooting him glares of anger. Seeing that you want to finally contribute to class, perhaps you would care to share your thoughts on the subject? Professor Oblek inquired the guy in question in a stern but professional tone. Well, I know it's a lot easier to train an animal than a soldier. Carden retorted with a sneer, causing some of the people present, some of them were faunus, to glare at him while the members of his team nodded in agreement. You're not the most open-minded of individuals, are you, Carden? Pyrrha asked him from her seat with a roll of her eyes. What? You got a problem? Carden asked her with a sneer and narrowed eyes. The redhead from Team JNPR opened her mouth to answer, but someone we all know beat her to it. Well, seeing how you are behaving, I have a hard time believing you are human. You act more like a monkey with the amount of attention you are attracting to you, Harry teasingly responded. Everyone in the classroom laughed loudly once he finished talking, and Carden's reddened even more in embarrassment as his glares grew in intensity. Even Oblek, the teacher, was chuckling. During the whole thing, Harry hadn't stopped grinning at Carden, not at all bothered by his glare of anger. A moment later, everything went back to normal and Professor Oblek went back to his professional state. Now who can answer the question? Pyrrha raised her hands. Yes, Ms. Nikos. It's night vision. Many faunus are known to have nearly perfect sight in the dark. The redhead responded in a calm tone, and Carden growled from his seat as he glared at Pyrrha. General Lagoon was inexperienced, and made the mistake of trying to ambush the faunus in their sleep. His massive army was outmatched, and the general was captured. Blake added from her seat before looking toward a certain fuming young man. Perhaps if he'd paid attention in class, he wouldn't have been remembered as such a failure. At those words, Carden's eyes showed nothing but anger as he rose from his seat with clenched fists. Harry's eyes narrowed as he looked ready to intervene, but the professor was quicker. Mr. Winchester. Please take your seat and you will see me after class for additional reading. Carden fumed in embarrassment at this as he sat back on his seat, before shooting furious glares toward Pyrrha, Blake and Harry. Now moving on. Time skip. Later in the day, Harry was alone in the library, finishing the last bit of homework he had. Team Rwby and JNPR both returned to their dorms, so he was all by himself. Sure, he loved their company, but, like many people a part of him, he also greatly enjoys some peace and quiet. Sighing as he finished the last sentences of his essay, our hero slowly put away his stuffs before making his way out of the library. As he walked in one of the many hallways of Beacon, he stopped dead on his tracks when he heard someone speaking. Is there any news from Crow? Ozpin's voice reached his ears. No, we still have no words from Crow, said a feminine voice he recognized as Glinda's. Without making a sound, he used his powers to hide himself, not only physically but also his scent, aura and other stuffs that might cause people to detect his presence. One of the advantages of being the embodiment of death, albeit the clone of the true deal, he could become invisible to any human senses. Now perfectly hidden, he kept his ears sharp as he listening to the conversation, especially when not only was Glinda there but also the headmaster himself. I wonder what's taking him so long, Glinda said to the headmaster as the two of them appeared in Harry's view. As they unconsciously approached him, Ozpin answered to her in a calm tone, Glinda, you know like me how serious he can be concerning her, especially with what happened with Amber. At the name Amber, Harry's attention was entirely on the two, and when they passed by him, he quietly decided to follow them while using a bit of his magic to make sure no one could hear his footsteps. Speaking of her, how is she? Glinda asked the headmaster with some concern in her tone. She is fine but still in comatose state, I'm afraid. Until we manage to catch whoever had attacked her and stole her powers, there is nothing we can do, Ozpin responded with a note of disappointment and sorrow. None of the two knew that they were being followed. About that, do we have any clues on who they are? Glinda asked her boss with narrowed eyes. Ozpin only shook his head, and the woman sighed again in disappointment this time. Harry couldn't help the smirk growing on his face. Cinder might be a power-hungry girl, but she sure knew how to hide her trails, he can give her that. As if it wasn't bad enough, the relic had been stolen, Ozpin whispered softly. Do you think she had it? Glinda asked him with some worry in her voice. I don't know. Let's hope not, Ozpin retorted calmly but with a shiver. If only you knew. Now please lead me to Amber, he silently pleaded them with slight annoyance and anticipation. Much to his sadness, they stopped talking about Amber to talk about the students instead. Sure, it was interesting and all, but it was not what he was looking for. Soon enough, Glinda left to her own office, leaving the headmaster alone. Harry watched in silence as the old man sighed deeply in sadness before walking away. However, he was not heading toward his office, which was both strange and interesting in Harry's opinion. After a moment of walking, Ozpin walked toward the end of a corridor before stopping right in front of a door. When he opened it thanks to a code, Harry was stunned to see it was not a simple door but an elevator. Quickly but still silently entering it alongside Ozpin, he managed to not bump into the man as the latter closed the door, trapping them both in the elevator. After a few moments, the elevator opened and Harry found himself vast and dimly lit by wall-mounted torches that cast a pale green light. But then his eyes spotted something at the end of the corridor, life support machines. He wanted to rush forward but he had to be silent and instead following Ozpin as the man approached the machines. Through the glasses, Harry could see who was inside and was internally overjoyed. He had found Amber's body. Ignoring Ozpin completely, our hero putted a hand on the machine before saying internally, "I will find Cinder, I promise it on my title as Death." Then he left as silently as possible. One part of the mission done now, it's time to look for dear Cinder, Harry thought to himself as he used the elevator to leave the vault. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Asian Lion Heart 310 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video, till then goodbye.